Good morning, all of you. Now we are revising Geography chapter number 1, Resource and Development. Now the question, what is or what are resources? And you all are aware about this. A resource is anything available in the environment, which can be used to satisfy our needs. That means useful to human beings and is economically feasible, technologically accessible, and culturally acceptable. That is called resource. And you can easily understand through this interdependent relationship between nature, technology, and institutions. Physical environment, technology, and institutions. And only human beings, which are also the natural resources, interact with nature through technology. And to utilize that resources, create institutions. And the purpose is to accelerate their economic development. So this is interdependent relationship. Now, classification of resources. For the classification of resources, we can divide it into two categories, natural and human-made resources. And now here, we'll discuss about natural resources. Natural resources first categories on the basis of origin. That is having two parts, biotic and abiotic. Biotic resources obtained from biosphere and living organisms like human beings, plants, and animals that have lives. All human beings, flora, fauna, fisheries, livestock, etc. And now, abiotic resources composed of non-living things, or we can say resources obtained from non-living. Example, rocks and matter. After that, classification of resources on the basis of ownership. That means who is the owner of the resources? That is individual resources, community-owned resources, national resources, and international resources. Now, individual resources, resources that are owned privately by individuals, that whatever the book you are using, that is your individual resources. Land owned by farmer, allotted by the government against the payment of revenue. Plantations, pasture lands, ponds, water in wells, owned by individuals. Houses, plots, and other property owned by people in the city, that is called individual resources. And when we are talking about community resources that are accessible to all the members of a community, whether it is related with public parks, playgrounds, in rural areas, village commons, that is grazing land, rail grounds, village ponds, etc. Now, after that, national resources. As it says by name, resources that belong to the nation. National resources included railways, forests, land within political boundaries, and oceanic areas up to 12 nautical miles from the coast. and that is also called territorial water. This is one more question, most important question. Territorial waters. And 12 nautical miles area, that means 19.2 kilometers from the coast. That is called national resources. And the country has legal powers to acquire even private property for public good, like construction of metro. So government can acquire private property also for the public good. And for this, urban development authorities get empowered by the government to acquire land. Next is international resources, as it says by name, international, that are regulated by certain international institutions. Can anyone tell me about some international institutions?
Yes, ma'am. Oceans.
No, I'm asking about the international name of the international institutions.
Ma'am, NASA.
No, NASA, so that is from US. I'm asking about international institution, WHO. Just now you have completed MUN also. UN, United Nations Organization. That is the international organization. So they regulate some laws like the oceanic resources beyond 200 kilometers of the exclusive economic zone. This is also one more question. What is EEZ, exclusive economic zone? That means open ocean and no individual country can utilize these without the concurrence of international institutions. And that is the area beyond 2 kilometers of oceanic resource. India had to obtain the right to mine manganese nodules from the bed of the Indian Ocean, from an area which lies beyond the exclusive economic zone. So these were the basis of ownership. Now we'll discuss about classification of the resources on the basis of exhaustibility. That is also having two types, renewable resources and non-renewable. Renewable resources, as it proves with the names, the resources which can be renewed or reproduced by physical, chemical, or mechanical process. That is called renewable. Example, solar and wind energy, water, forest, wildlife. And renewable resources may further be divided into continuous or flow resources. That is wind and water. Non-renewable resources is proved with the name. Non-renewable resources are formed over a long geological time. That means which cannot be renewed short period of time. It takes millions of years to form, like minerals and fossil fuels. That is also divided into two categories: recyclable resources, that is metals; non-recyclable resources, that is fossil fuels, which cannot be recycled and get exhausted with their use. Next is classification of resources on the basis of development. This is the most important, and this is a new for you also. Number one, potential resources. Potential resources means resources are found in a region, but not fully utilized, like wind and solar energy. They are having potential in the states of Gujarat and Rajasthan. We are utilizing that resources, but not fully. There is a loss of potential in that resources. Next is developed resources. As is proof with the name, if you will see the name, it automatically concluded the resources that have been surveyed and determined for utilization for both qualitatively and quantitatively. And development of resources, as we have initially discussed about, depends on technology and level of their feasibility. Next, stocks and reserves. If you will just read the name, both are almost similar, but there is a difference between, slight difference. Stock. The resources which have potential to satisfy human needs, but we are not having the appropriate technology to utilize these resources, and maybe in future we'll get the technology and utilize that resources. So automatically they convert into stock. Like water is a compound of two inflammable gases, hydrogen and oxygen, which can be used as a source of energy, but we are not having the required technical know-how, so it can be considered as stock. Now the reserves. Reserves are the subset of the stock which are yet to be put into use. That means we are having resources, we are having the technology, but still that can be used for future. That are called reserves. We have reserved as resources for the future use. Like river water can be used for generating hydroelectric power, but presently utilized only to a limited extent. That means the water in the dams is a reserve which can be used in the future. And normally in exams, the students are confused in stocks and reserves. The difference only is stock, we are not having the technology, but reserve, we are having the technology. And both are for future needs. So this is the classification of resources. Next, after that, what are the problems? Problems related with use of resources by man. Many resources got depleted because now we are living in that world where not only utilization of resources, that is the exploitation of resources by human beings, and concentration of resources in few hands. And this is the result that society is divided into haves and have-nots, rich or poor. And when there will be exploitation of resources led to the environmental degradation, global warming, ozone layer depletion, the problems related with exploitation of resources. So as our chapter name is Resource and Development, so not only development, today we are not thinking about development. Today we are concerned about sustainable development. And I hope that you will be aware about what is sustainable development. Anyone? What do you mean by sustainable development? Yes. What is a sustainable development? No one?
Ma'am, may I tell?
Yes, beta.
Ma'am, may I tell?
Okay, bolo. Saksham.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, how we can take care of our environment and how we can protect them for the future use also.
Yes. Okay.
Ma'am, may I?
Yes.
Ma'am, sustainable development means that the development should take place, but without damaging the environment, and the development in the present should not compromise with the needs of the future generations.
Yes, this is the exact definition of sustainable development. Because sustainable development, that means it is having two parts. Not only thinking about present, but we have to think about future also. And present, what is the present need of present need? That is without damaging the environment. And for future, we have to utilize the resources in such a manner that we can save for the future needs. So that is called sustainable development. That means it should be eco-friendly and needs for the future generation. These are the two components of sustainable development. So economic development which does not damage the environment, that is the present, and at the same time takes care of the needs of the future generation. That is called sustainable development. Now, sustainable development, 1992, more than 100 nations joined together. That was the last decade of the 20th century. Countries of the world were worried about development process. So 1992, Rio de Janeiro, first Earth Summit was held, and they have adopted Agenda 21 for the sustainable development for the future. Next is planning. As we are talking about resource sustainable development, so automatically what is the need of the earth? That is the planning. And resource planning means a technique or skill of proper utilization of resources. This is again the most important topic. And it has different stages also. And the stages are identification of the resources, which includes surveying, mapping, measurement of the qualities and quantities. That are the important activities undertaken. And after that, planning for exploitation of the resources. We have to develop a plan structure with suitable technology, skill and institutional setup. And after that, third stage, match resource development plans with the national development plans. So these are the stages of resource planning. Now resource planning in India also. If you remember in class 9, we have studied chapter physical features of India. And in that chapter, we have studied that some regions are rich in particular resources and some are poor in other resources. So now we have to do the planning structure in such a way that we can utilize the resources and overall development of the country can be done. So for that, what we require, that is resource planning. Yes, India. Some regions are rich in certain types of resources, but deficient in others. They're like state of Rajasthan, great scope of wind and solar energy, but shortage of water resources. Cold desert of Ladakh, rich cultural heritage, but deficient in water, infrastructure, and some vital minerals. Arunachal Pradesh, abundance of water, but lacks infrastructure development. Some regions are self-sufficient, while other regions are very poor in important resources, like MP, rich in resources, but Ladakh, poor in resources. So wastage of resources can be avoided by planning. And the planning, through planning, we can do overall development of the country. We can reduce the environmental pollution, and over exploitation of resources can be avoided. Now next is resource conservation. Resource conservation, that means for the future needs, the planned use of resources in order to meet the present needs and to store a part for the future generation is called resource conservation. And what is the need of this conservation? As we have discussed about the classification of resources, and in that we have observed that non-renewable resources are also there. And if you will see that the resources, that is renewable resources, are also converting into non-renewable. Can anyone really give me the example of that resources? The resources which are renewable, but due to over exploitation of that resources, slowly they are also converting into non-renewable resources. Anyone?
Ma'am, coal and petroleum.
Because that are the non-renewable resources.
Ma'am, they are non-renewable only.
So I'm asking about the resources which are renewable, but due to over exploitation of that, slowly they are converting into non-renewable.
Ma'am, soil.
The soil तो आपका renewable है, but तो slow process है. That is also okay, but इससे भी बहुत बड़ा एक resource है, that is water. Our Earth, which is called a blue planet. But still, if you will observe, some areas are converting into यहाँ पर less availability. Zero water day also declare. And I having idea about this 0 day, 0 water day was also observed. So water is the best example of renewable resources, but now it is converting into non-renewable resources because as compared to exploitation, हम उसको compare करते हैं, then you will get the instructions. So if we conserve them, we can use them for a long period of time. So conservation of resources helps us to reduce wastage. It will help in economic progress and protect the environment also. Mahatma Gandhi has given a word statement: there is enough for everybody's need and not for greediness. What does it mean? Because greediness and selfish individuals exploitative nature of modern technology are the root cause of resource development. You just see this statement. Can anyone explain this statement? Mass production and production by masses.
Yes.
Yes, बताइए बेटा.
Ma'am, he was against the mass production. Ma'am, means that he was.
What do you mean? In a simple word, what do you mean by mass production and production by mass? Yes, Trisha.
Mass production means that a single person is producing a large mass of goods by using machines, and instead of mass production, production is done by large mass of people, then a lot of people can be also employed.
Good. But in a simple word, mass production means production by machine. So through machines, we can get production in a large quantity. And production by masses means that production by people. That means maximum people will get the employment. So gap between the rich and poor will reduce. Then mass production will be there. The gap between the rich and poor will be widened. But production by masses means that all are having the equal opportunities to utilize the resources. Okay. So you have to justify